I have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
In the face of what many see as an egregious judicial overreach into the Trump administration's policy implementation, Vice President JD Vance recently challenged the court's encroachment on the executive branch's constitutional prerogatives. It's undoubtedly time to reestablish the separation of powers based on the U.S. Constitution. Vance's arguments center on an accurate reading and understanding of the fundamental principle of the separation of powers. His interpretation, which has been validated over the years in various U.S. Supreme Court rulings, highlights how anti-Trump judicial actions have repeatedly attempted to usurp the executive branch's rightful authority over key functions like military command and prosecutorial discretion, not to mention its exclusive purview of branch organizational operations. The separation of powers doctrine, codified in the Articles of the U.S. Constitution, that establishes the three branches of government, is meant to ensure that each branch of government checks the others to prevent any one from being too powerful. However, judicial activism, such as what we're seeing in the politically motivated actions of today's courts against Trump's executive actions, can upset this balance by allowing the judiciary to encroach on the powers of the legislative or executive branches. Robert Bork, in his book The Tempting of America, critiques judicial activism as a political enterprise masquerading as law, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia, in his book Reading Law, the Interpretation of Legal Texts, frequently argued against judicial activism, advocating for originalism, where judges interpret the Constitution based on its text and the original understanding of its terms. The current controversy ignited when a federal judge brazenly blocked the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk, from accessing critical Treasury Department systems. This judicial act blatantly infringed on the executive's operational autonomy. This judicial intervention is but one example of how the courts have systematically challenged President Trump's executive orders to restructure and optimize federal government operations. These orders included significant policies that would reorganize and streamline operations, eliminate the wasting of taxpayer dollars, and specifically dismantle the deep state monetary feed trough that was the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID. With over 24 lawsuits filed directly opposing the president's executive orders, deep staters and Democrat judicial appointees have undertaken an alarming trend in lawfare, where judicial blocs have become political tools to thwart the administration's reformative agenda. This politically motivated lawfare obstructs the people's mandate given to Trump in his 2024 landslide victory. Critics like the disgraced Liz Cheney and U.S. Senator Adam "Boy, do I have a problem with telling the truth" Schiff, Democrat from California, have ignorantly painted Vance's defense of executive authority as advocacy for lawlessness. However, when presented with examples of how Presidents Biden and Obama abused executive authority for purely political purposes, in particular, Biden's repeated orders to ignore the U.S. Supreme Court in his advancement of student loan forgiveness, these two political numpties were notably silent. This obstructionist view starkly contrasts with the insights offered by legal scholars like Yale's Jed Rubenfeld, who supports Vance's stance that certain executive branch functions are inherently outside the judiciary's scope and purview, and Harvard law professor Adrian Vermeule, who also argued that such judicial blocks violate the separation of powers, saying judicial interference with legitimate acts of state, especially the internal functioning of a co-equal branch, is a violation of the separation of powers. Vance himself put it this way.
If a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general in how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power.
As the administration navigates these legal challenges through what is rightfully recognized as politically weaponized and biased lower courts, the expectation is that these cases will reach the Supreme Court, where a more constitutionally minded review will restore balance. But Mr. Trump, his advisors, and legal minds would be wise to borrow from Andrew Jackson's attitude. The seventh president viewed the U.S. Constitution from an originalist point of view, as all federally elected and appointed officials should, and often had a contentious relationship with the judicial branch. Jackson often emphasized the sovereignty of states and the limited role of the federal government as mandated by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. This viewpoint extended to opposing and sometimes ignoring judicial review when their decisions could be argued to be extra-constitutional and or unconstitutionally expansive in their purview. Some key examples come in the veto of his rechartering of the Second Bank of the United States and his handling of South Carolina's nullification of federal tariffs in 1832 and 1833, in which he used his executive power to counter what he saw as judicial overreach. That said, the ongoing legal battles have not only spotlighted the judiciary's contemporary penchant for grotesque overreach, and this is especially true of the lower courts of the federal judiciary at the hands of Democrat appointees, but they also raise alarms about the possibility of a budding constitutional crisis based on the separation of powers, establishing the political and ideological left as the genesis of any potential constitutional crisis. Vance's bold, wholly constitutional-based rhetoric has escalated the debate on this matter. However, it has also highlighted critical inconsistencies, such as the aforementioned Supreme Court decision on President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan, which reflects a selective acceptance of applicable judicial branch power. With President Trump's re-election, these confrontations are not just legal skirmishes, but pivotal moments calling out the need to reestablish the boundaries, based on the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, of presidential authority versus judicial oversight and review in the American governance framework. In fact, these confrontations make it clear that the deep state, the usurpers of authority, must recognize and accept a complete re-understanding of the federal government's constitutionally established limitations. This underscores the urgent need for a national dialogue on our nation's constitutional illiteracy, and especially our elected officials' constitutional apathy, and the need to uphold the separation of powers and the limitations set forth for the federal government under the U.S. Constitution. We urgently need this to ensure that each branch of government operates within its constitutional confines, free from undue interference by the other co-equal branches of government, so that we the people start to understand that politics is not government, and government shouldn't be politics. When we come back, a few words on the arduous task ahead for the Trump administration and our republic.
You're listening to Underground USA.
The foundation of our great nation lies in our unwavering commitment to freedom, and at its core is the principle of free speech. It's not just a right, but a duty to speak our minds, respectfully debate, and challenge ideas. Today, free speech is under attack by the forces of the deep state and the globalists. We must all do our part to protect free speech, for without it, we'd be lost in a sea of woke conformity and censorship. We have the right. Protect it.
We were due a brief celebration after the 2024 general election. Far from the usual rhetoric surrounding our every four-year event, this past election was historical. It was historical for the re-election of a non-incumbent president, but it was also historical for the grand redirection for which the American people voted. In the short time that Trump has been back in office, we've seen the seating of a full cabinet of Washingtonian outsiders. This is unprecedented. Yes, some of them have been in the federal sphere before, but never in a conglomeration like this, each with a commitment to radical, reformative change. But it's one monumental thing to win an election and then seat the cabinet you want. It's quite another to defeat the deep state uniparty machine in the quest to fulfill campaign promises and the commitment to return the U.S. federal government to the people, to serving the people. The deep state swamp is thick and full of obstacles. As I mentioned earlier, the labyrinth of lawfare is not just something that can be brushed aside with a narrative campaign. No meme is going to change that. The radical deep staters of the left, like Mark Elias, the Soroses, and the Clintonian creatures of the past, who still feed off the rot with the bottom feeders, they've been planning for this moment for at least 2 years, amassing armies of orc-like lawyers and researching which courts and judges to bring their lawfare in front of, all to diminish the extent to which Mr. Trump can harm their machine, their spendthrift, globalist, New World Order status quo, the deep state. In addition to the usual suspects of the radical transformative left, we have the accomplices in the establishment and elitist Republican Party. Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and the rest of the fill-up-the-pockets, go-along-to-get-along Republicans who've conned their way into the halls of power are all against the winds of reformative change. They would rather see things remain the way they are, because that allows them to maintain the con. And they get rich off the con. The USAID scam proves that beyond any doubt. This is why we, you and I and everyone we know who is sick and tired of the grift that's been executed on us, on our country, this is why we must keep the pressure on. That means not falling for or advancing untruthful memes and social media posts, jettisoning the opinions and only consuming the facts, and maintaining pressure on those elected to represent us, and perhaps some who don't, to constantly remind them that there will be consequences for their abdication of commitment to return the country to the people from the control of the deep state swampeteers. The battle is clear. It's reformative change versus transformative change. Today, the deep staters, the globalists, the elites, the U.S. oligarchs are all on the side of transformative change. Interesting how that trans word is in there, isn't it? And the people who want to be free to make our own decisions and live our own lives without some busybody, annoying Karen from some swamp agency telling us what we can and can't do, and then how we can do what they're letting us do on the other side. It's we, you and I, versus the elitist, oligarchic deep state. So, my friends, we're at the beginning of the fight, not the middle, and certainly not the end. The question you must ask yourself is this: are you in or are you out?
You're listening to Underground USA.
A free and independent media is the backbone of our great republic. So it's crucial to have media outlets that aren't influenced by big tech censorship or the leftist mainstream media complex. But that means supporting journalistic outlets that bring us the truth without spinning facts to push a narrative. For less than the cost of a cup of coffee once a month at Starbucks, you can support the free speech mission of undergroundusa.com, an independent, reader-supported, and sometimes irreverent podcast and publication that gives you the real story without the bias. Go to undergroundusa.com/UUSA. That's undergroundusa.com/UUSA to receive a 25% discount on an annual subscription, bringing every new podcast and article directly into your email inbox, circumventing the censors and fact checkers. Remember, knowledge is power, and staying informed is one of the best ways to protect our republic. Go out there and seek the truth, my friends. Subscribe to undergroundusa.com today.
If you like the podcast, please head over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It brings every new podcast and article directly into your email inbox. And be sure to do your part in the war that we're in, the battle between reformative change and transformative change, the battle between we the people and the deep state. Talk politics and current events, and even religion with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. When we have these conversations, we realize that there's more of us than there are of them, and that hobbles them from being able to divide us in order to conquer us, or, as it is, remain conquered. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no wokeism, no political correctness. My name is Frank Salvato.
Wokeism is a threat to the very foundations of our great nation and to the very principles of liberty and justice. The goal of wokeism is to divide us, pitting Americans against one another based on race, gender, and identity. This ideology undermines free speech and open dialogue, which are the bedrock of our republic. It promotes censorship and cancels anyone who dares to challenge its extreme agenda. We must stand against this cultural Marxism and protect our constitutional rights. Say no to wokeism.